Hi, everyone, and I really want to thank Brand Innovators for putting on this event. Has been really good. I've been watching all the days, and the information has been really great. So, again, my name is Edwin Yuen, so I'm the Senior Director of Product Management at iSpot TV, and we make a platform that helps brands and networks and agencies measure TV and program ratings. And with me is Paolo Provinciali. First time in public, but we're going to talk a little bit about all the different things that influence what happens in sports marketing with Anheuser-Busch. So, Paolo, really the first question, I'll hand you the mic. A little bit of background about you and your background, but what you're doing in Anheuser-Busch.
Sure. So we were sharing the mic. This is becoming very friendly. As everyone said, Paolo Provinciali, I'm the head of media for the US Anheuser-Busch, and I have mainly two responsibilities. One is obviously stewarding all the advertising that accompany their portfolio of brands in the US, and the other one is also the collection, enrichment, and activation of data for the purpose of planning, targeting, and measurement of everything that we do. To describe better what I've been focusing on and what I do is better zoom out for a second, think about how AD shares a vision. We all share a vision in terms of leading future growth, both for the category and the industry, right? And we do believe that in order to do that, we have to be consumer-centric in everything that we do. And therefore, in the context of media and what I work with my team is thinking about how consumer trends have changed, how media consumption has changed, and therefore how do we adapt to that, right? So we know, for example, that 41% of US households are not reachable by linear TV nowadays, right? So you need to start thinking about how do you reach them. Or we know that 21 to 35-year-old now prefer watching the highlights rather than the full game. And therefore thinking about how do I start a conversation with those, with those people, those audiences, or e-commerce now is a huge thing, also based on the fact that we're all wearing masks and the past 2 years. So thinking about how do you get involved in this new purchasing decision, right? And so me and my team have been focusing on a few things. For example, thinking about a holistic media strategy that spans across digital and linear, thinking about how we are part of, as we said, the social conversation, not just what happens on the back broadcast and on the field, right? When we talk about big sporting events, we're thinking about how do we show up in e-commerce and shopper media that is now growing at an exponential rate, and thinking about how we measure our efforts, not just using the established way of doing, measurement, but also new ways of measuring, and a lot of work has been done around consumer attention, for example, that we do. And everything that we work on throughout the year comes to an apex during Super Bowl, and that's the reason why it's such a big week for us, and very, very glad to be here with you today.
It was kind of funny. I was thinking this is probably the closest I've sat next to a person who's not my family without masks. So I think we're all here to talk really about sports and Super Bowl. How has Anheuser-Busch kind of adjusted to the new normal, or hopefully we'll end, but the new normal that we have, especially at the peak of the pandemic in 2020, 2021? You had sports, but there were threats of cancellation of the season. There were games that were being moved. There were fans, there were no fans, there were bubbles, there were no bubbles. Everything was just so dynamic. How did you guys adjust to that? And what tools did you use to kind of stay on top of being with sports, but adjusting to all the changes that were happening, that could be happening almost daily?
Right, absolutely. So thinking back about the past 2 years, I always think of the phrase, plans are useless, but planning is everything, right? and I think that's how we lived in the past 2 years. Because, as you said, everything could have changed in the last, a week before, a day before, games could have been canceled, or season could have been moved. And so it was always about being very agile in everything we do, and being not too tied to the plans that you set out to do. But I think that the key of being successful in this agility and showing up always in the right way is thinking about how you can always be relevant and resonant with the audience. And so relevant is the classic thing of advertising, right message, right person, right time. But in a world where everything moves and everything shifts, now you have to be very close to your, broadcasting partners and say, okay, things are changing. How do we address this? Or even your social partners, because when things change, the conversation happens online, on social and digital, right? And so think about how do I enter that conversation in the right way, in the right moment. And the way you do that is really thinking about how you can show up in credibility, right? And make sure that your message can be perceived as authentic. And actually, you have a place where you can have that conversation. And in order to do that, we flex the power of our in all our brands, right? So the way we show up is different. Budweiser has always been championing the American spirit. And this means that, even in the past, last year, after 37 years, Budweiser was not in Super Bowl, right? And that is a very powerful message, but it comes to the credibility. Then when you show up, you actually have, something to say that is real, right? Bud Light has always been celebrating fandom and fans and bringing the joy and the fun to everything they do. The gesture kind of archetype, if you will. And therefore, it shows up in the conversation when appropriate in a way that actually brings you that joy and that relief and makes everything more fun. Ultra, a brand that stands for keeping a balanced lifestyle. Think about the past 2 years where, keeping a balanced lifestyle wasn't very, easy. So, has activated in many different ways to actually bring the message that it's only worth it if you enjoy it. So, when fans were virtual, we showed up during the NBA season in the virtual screen, and we activated in a very fun way. And now that we're getting in person, we're going to activate it in a very fun way during the Super Bowl. So it's about, relevance and resonance, and don't be too attached to your plan, but being agile.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If it's being authentic and being agile, that's something that is so difficult when you really are trying to land on message. So we're here really talking about the Super Bowl, thinking about it. Anheuser-Busch is just so tied to the Super Bowl. I mean, I can't think of a Super Bowl except last year without the Clydesdale ad. I know yesterday we showed the ad. That was a great ad, I have to say. It's actually a very popular ad in our iSpot Super Bowl ad center. People are already excited about it coming back. But in terms of the Super Bowl, how do you use a big tentpole event like that to really drive your marketing and your brand through the year? How do you really leverage that?
Yeah, that's a very big question, and obviously, being such a large advertiser in the Super Bowl, it comes with a big degree of responsibility, right? And so we think about first and foremost how showing up in the Super Bowl for our brands aligns to our commercial strategy. So it can be a new message for an established brand. It can be a new product extension for an established brand, or a whole new brand. This work happens, months and months in advance. So like before was saying, they coordinated their past Super Bowl in season, and that's it's wild. But obviously, we also show up with many ads, many brands. Easier to give your reference. We're going to be showing up with 6 ads on the national broadcast and our 3 ads on the regional broadcast. And this is exactly the thinking that we have, just saying what are the brands that at this point in time can leverage the national presence, and then use that as a kickoff point throughout the year, and building an awareness for that new message or that new product or that new brand in a way that actually carries through throughout the year, right? Or at the regional level, we think about, okay, what are the DMAs, the regions, the city, the states where actually that brand is very meaningful to that audience, and therefore we can actually show up in the right way. So it's definitely a strategic conversation, and it's a big investment, big responsibility. But we are trying to be as methodical as we can in terms of approaching it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we had heard a little discussion of the 6 different brands. I wasn't aware of some of them. Sweetwater was really a new one. So you use the Super Bowl to kind of kick off your year. How do you then kind of keep that momentum going? So it doesn't just drop off and people sit there and say, well, we see you once a year. How do you keep the momentum going, especially other ways with digital and other interactions that you have beyond just traditional Super Bowl advertising?
Yeah, that's also a big consideration, right? Like the rule that we try to apply is that cannot be a flash in the pan, right? It cannot be just one thing that you show up with the day and then you're done. And in order to do this, we have two approaches. One is the way we activate the Super Bowl, the in-broadcast kind of activation, just to pick up the actor. And it's a rallying cry for all the company and all the different functions, right? So if you think about what we're going to be doing this year with some of our brands, everyone is going to have an experiential element to it. It's going to have a digital and social element to it. It's going to have, a customer data capture, loyalty, and engagement to it. And therefore, allows you not just to have that single spot, but actually have an ecosystem of elements that come together so that you can actually carry the message forward. To give you an example, Bud Light with its new product, Bud Light Next, it has recently dropped an NFT, and the consumers that are gonna buy the NFT are gonna get access to those experiences and they're branded in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. Ultra has a very strong theme on the bowling alley in their spot with a lot of celebrities. I don't know if you've seen it, but they have access to the merch drop, which is very popular in the sneaker world. And Ultra, for example, has done sneaker-like drops in the past in the NBA season, and now it's doing it for NFL. So there is always a component that it doesn't start and end in the game, but it's always beyond the game. We have retail activations with our retail partners that carries through the point of purchase, e-commerce partners, same exact thing. So it's a whole ecosystem endeavor. And the second thing to remember is that the fact that you see a brand like Water you were mentioning, Super Bowl, allows you to kickstart the awareness at a national level. So that allows you to carry through the message and the conversation with your audience. So, you build that awareness, you build a memory structure, and then at that point, you can be as easy as, a tweet, a social post, or a 6-second bumper, for example, to keep that memory structure alive and keep that conversation rather than just having, continuous media present. So it's a 360 approach, and it's really a cross-team effort across multiple teams in the organization, from the marketing side and sales side, and really kicks off the year for us for a year now.
Yeah, I've already seen some of the things that you're talking about. So I was looking up the color. I was actually looking up the next launch because that was very interesting and saw that NFT. I know we've had a number of different discussions, and we'll transition to a topic I know that you're pretty passionate about. There's a lot of discussions right now about how do you measure the impact with your audiences, the impact of your advertising, your brand, a discussion about alternative currencies. I know at iSpot, we started working with NBCU just recently. We're testing out the Olympics, and we're also testing out the Super Bowl, with different measurements. What's your kind of view of the alternative currencies and what's driving and what's important to you?
Sure. So I think that we are at a point in our industry that alternative currencies really become, a hot topic. And I'm a big believer that we need to evolve past, what we have used in the past, and we use this historical moment right in the industry and in society in order to do that step forward. We have talked with, obviously, with iSpot, with NBC, and many other partners in thinking about how do we think about new currency, and the industry is doing a little bit of a soul searching at this point, because we have to find what is going to be a reliable currency to trade. These only linear TV, I think it's a $71 billion business in the United States, right? So there is a lot of money at play here. And there are two fundamental elements that I believe are a requirement for a new currency, which needs to be representative of the people and the audience that you're going after, and trustworthy, right? And I think that started a crisis that we are in terms of historical currencies. And the way forward, I think there are only two ways forward. One is a currency that is a true representative of business impact, and therefore I put my money in what's the outcome there. And the other one, it can be a true representation of consumer behavior, and therefore understanding how consumers behave and what they do, and therefore understanding what people get rewarded on. I'm a big believer, as you said, of the latter, and therefore following consumer and everything they do. I think that the whole industry should rally behind the most scarce resource that we have in advertising, which is consumer attention. And if we zero in on that and we find a good way of measuring that, then it's going to be, for everyone and stuff like this. And everyone's on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know that iSpot we do measurements, but a lot of the other work that we do is trying to do things like attention or attribution. What's the role of attention going to play for alternative currency? What does that really mean? And, what about, is it only high attention? What exactly are we kind of thinking about? How do you want to see the benefits of it?
Yeah, so attention is something that we talk about a lot, right? And this is the reason why we're referring to the Super Bowl. And we talk so much about Super Bowl. Super Bowl gathers so much attention. It's probably the only programming where actually people tune in not just for the game, but also for the ads, which is, wild to think about it, right? But attention is actually, it's a representation of consumer behavior. And I think that if we can align the whole industry and align the incentives of the whole industry to actually do something that is good for consumers, at the end of the day, it's going to come back to everyone. It's people, right? Advertisers, measurement partners, sell side, and all those kind of things. Attention can be divided in two ways. Attention is having an attentive environment where people advertise. Super Bowl is a perfect example of that, right? People tune in and look and watch the ad. And I think that the sell side, in my opinion, should be held accountable, but also prepared on the ability of having high attentive environments, because that is what kind of like a platform where the brands can express themselves. But the duty is also on the brand side, because they need to be able to actually have content that captures people's attention and retains people's attention in order to drive it. I personally am not a big fan of the idea that sometimes has been pushed in the industry of saying, okay, the sell side should also be responsible for the outcome, because there are so many variables that influence the success of my campaign and my product positioning, pricing, competitive moves, and all the other things that I don't think it's a fair thing to say that sometimes should be responsible for my ROI, but it should definitely be able to advertise in a high attentive environment and understanding what is the right price for that environment.
Yeah, you kind of bring it up, and I think about my family. We love watching the Super Bowl. I love the game. I love the ads. My wife doesn't like the game at all. Will watch the ads, and then my kids are in between. But they have certain different attentions. Are there different attention expectations for audiences?
That's also a really good question, and it ties into almost 2 years of research that we've done on this topic at AD. I'm actually one of the founding members of what's called the Attention Council, which is a group of measurement companies, scholars, brands to figure out how to best measure attention and optimize for attention, right, and customer attention, because that's, as I was saying before, one of the scarcest resources in the industry. And one of the biggest questions that we had from the get-go was, is attention a binary thing? Is it, I have attention or I don't have your attention? Right? And actually, after a bunch of research, help from world-renowned PhDs, we found out that actually attention is on a scale. And again, as I was saying before, it's not a matter of saying I buy only attentive thing, but it's what is the right price for the right level of attention. And so our attention is on the scale. And what we've done actually in the past 2 years is at AD, we have been transacting on attention. And therefore we have been saying, there's this high attentive environment that deserves a premium in the pricing that we pay for them. And there's low attentive environment, but with the right price, with the right CPM, it might make sense for our strategy. And therefore combining the two. Actually going even further, we started with some of our network partners to have them guarantee us on attention. It's like, I want these many attentive GRPs as part of our buy, right? And so it's a mind shift, and it's definitely something that changes the way that we transact in the industry and the currency. But to answer more directly your question in terms of audiences, right? There are so many. I wouldn't say that there is a specific audience that is more attentive than the other. Obviously, there is a combination of mediums of what you're trying to do or your brand and all these kind of things, because you need to remember that attention is only the first step in building a memory structure that builds a brand equity that drives sales, right? And therefore, there are so many elements of this journey that you have to be careful. So we analyze everything from pod positioning to unit length to all these kind of things, and it's the mix of all of them. Where we can all agree on is that once you provide that attentive environment at the right price, then you can actually move everyone forward with the right level of incentives.
So as we go on, we get attention, we have that attention, and we drive impact. How do you go ahead and measure the impact or use the data that you get in terms of how do you think your brands are landing or creative landing? I know at iSpot we have a tool called Ace Metrics, and Anheuser-Busch is a customer where we test out the ads and we see how they land and how people feel about it. And we tested out, like 60% of the Super Bowl ads already. But you get all this data. It's great. It says people love it, they don't love it, or they have an emotion impact. How do you use that data then to actually change your creative or change how you go ahead and apply your brand?
Yeah, it's undeniable that a lot of what we see during Super Bowl is almost art, right? It's creativity at its purest, but like creativity with a methodical approach, right? I'm a big believer of the fact that data drives insight, and insights has to drive creativity, right? You cannot just do creativity for creativity's sake. That's art, and it has its place, but we also are in the business of driving a business forward, right? And therefore, thinking about, okay, what do I know about my audience, the audience that want to, and how can I find that, that opportunity to influence them or starting the conversation with them in a way that actually is going to resonate with them? That is the key. So we do a lot of work in leading up to Super Bowl or any other kind of creative or campaign that we do. Because as we said, we have a lot invested. It's a long process, and therefore we want to be as methodical as we possibly can. And we are methodical in the sense that we have pre-testing and we have, war rooms. I have a whole team in New York now that is monitoring every tweet and everything that is going on with our spots and our ads and our campaigns and all these kind of things. And then we do post-mortems and all these kind of things. But as much as you want to be methodical and data-driven, building a brand and brand advertising really has its limitations the way you measure. And we're getting better at measuring, but has its limitations. And therefore, at some point, it becomes a work of intuition and experience. And this is where I'm very privileged of working with a super kind group of people at Anheuser-Busch that is probably one of the best, brand advertisers in the world. And that's where, the intuition makes the difference when you've done when all the data is there. And this is, what we try to bring forward in the metrics.
So I think we're going to wrap up here. I have one last question. And since Anheuser-Busch is such an iconic Super Bowl advertiser, are there certain points that you would give to a company or a brand out there that is either considering whether or not to advertise in the Super Bowl or not advertise in the Super Bowl, or maybe just how much to do so? And, what do you think about what's driving you? Because I know last year, the commercial time went to COVID, and then you decided to come back this year. How do you make decisions in terms of how much or when to invest, and how do you best leverage things like the Super Bowl?
Yeah, that's also a very important question. And obviously, you don't have to go every year with 6 ads or 4 minutes in national broadcast. And last year we pulled back with an iconic brand like Budweiser. I can't give you away all the secrets because it's a little bit of job security. I mean, oh my God, so, but I give you a little bit. So first and foremost, I don't think that you can ever look at an event like Super Bowl in isolation. It's a point, as I was saying before, it's the tip of the iceberg, but it's so much more around, right? And looking at Super Bowl in isolation is like, geek out a little bit from my performance marketing background, is like looking just at branded keywords, right? You miss the bigger picture. It's everything that goes into that. So you need to be methodical in figuring out how you actually leverage this tentpole event in order to lead up to it, and everything that happens later, and how that bump in awareness, that bump in visibility actually is helping you with all the other efforts that you have. There is a product life cycle consideration, what we were talking about before, in terms of saying, is this the right moment for our brand? And a conversation that we often have with our products is, this is a new product. It might not have the distribution that we need when the whole nation, starts finding out about it, right? So that's another thing. And there are other things that you can consider. You need to consider how you leverage all the different tactics to engage your audiences. That we're saying about the loyalty programs that we set up, it is a merch drop and an NFT drop or whatever you want, and figuring out ways to engage your audience. So it's a multifaceted decision to be made. You need to look at your media to production ratio, very simply, right? And all these kind of things. So I would say that you need to make it part of a broader company plan, and not just a part of just one activation. The other thing I would say though is that, for smaller brands, and I often have conversations with brands that maybe cannot afford to be in the Super Bowl, right? Or at this level. And thinking about what is the opportunity that you have in showing up in other places where your audience is very passionate about, and maybe there's opportunity that is not as developed as football. We were talking in the previous calendar, we're talking about gaming. That could be a perfect example in some instances, right? But a good thing that happens at Super Bowl and with sports in general is that every person, the audience, every fan is so passionate about it that when you insert yourself and your brand in it, then it allows you to create a connection that sometimes is stronger than other things that you do in that. So that is probably one of the big advantages to it.
Okay, I think that's it. Do we have any time? Or?
No, I think we're looking to a question or two.
Yeah, are there any questions or the right in the center back?
I have a question. So yesterday we heard from several on your team, Azania and others, and I think one of her lines was build synergy, not silos. So I'm curious, and it's a perfect segue from your last question about passion and sports, and how do you interact with the connections team? And so much of what you do is scale and national media, yet passion for a sport, in my opinion, resides mostly locally, with that local or favorite team. And then, obviously passion correlates great with, as you said, the chance for attention. So can you speak more for that?
Absolutely, and thank you for the great question. It's actually, I see in Azania's team, we're part of Connections. So, and this is actually a little bit of the secret weapon of our team, because I sit alongside, Matt, who leads sponsorship, and Ronnie, who leads experiential. And so the thing is that in everything we do, in everything we activate, there is, that 360 approach of thinking, okay, how do I leverage my sponsorship access, my IPs, in order to activate? How do I have media bringing those assets and that IP, at a national scale or the regional scale? And just to give you a little bit more visibility into how we're structured, my team is actually made of a national team and a regional team that are integrated, right? And therefore, we are able to leverage every plan that is executed at a national level, also to have the translation of it at a local level in a way that is tailored to that region, that DMA, that audience, and that is very, very supportive. But the same way, we do it the other way around. There are programs at a regional level, they are very successful, and at that point, we scale them at a national level. So I think that we do absolutely today's principle of synergy and not silos, and this is how we're coming together from very integrated brand teams and integrated brands, obviously, that activate keeping consumers and consumer passions at the center of everything.